Chemical City Double Reeds is a full-service double reed shop specializing in the sale of instruments, cane, accessories, and sheet music. Double Reed Dish listeners can enjoy free shipping with code DRDISH, all caps, no spaces. Visit them in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or online at chemicalcityreeds.com.
Hey, oboists! Have you ever found it difficult to sort out when and how to find a new oboe or English horn? Oboe Chicago streamlines the process, providing personal and professional consultation and a large selection of lovely instruments. The process feels comfortable and thorough. Selection includes F. Fleuret of Paris, Howarth of London, Covey oboes, and Fox products. For a current listing of Oboe Chicago's selection, please visit www.obochicago.com. For a credit of $100 toward shipping, mention Double Reed Dish when you call or email Shauna.
Hi, I'm Galit Kaunitz.
And I'm Jackie Wilson, and you're listening to Double Reed Dish,
a podcast for oboists,
bassoonists,
and the people who love them.
We are here in person together.
We are melted onto the couch, and we have a special guest on our dish today. It is our producer for the Double Reed Dish recording. It is the celebrity, Dr. Chris Wilson.
That's me.
So, Gilly, give a recap of the past, 48 hours. What have we been up to?
So, we've been recording 6 hours a day for the last 2 days. We are over halfway done.
Yes.
I don't know exactly how much over halfway. That's a question for our producer. But it has been busy. Our lips are chapped. It's been a whirlwind. This is my first real professional recording experience. So it's been really cool to see how the spaghetti gets made.
And what spaghetti? I'm pretty sure the thing is sausage. Sausage. I'm pretty sure it's sausage. Couldn't let that go. And Chris, why don't you give us a recap of how fabulous we sound?
Well, it's been going wonderfully. You have...
That was not the relevant question.
There is no weapon held to his throat.
So you have 5 days booked, and honestly, you're over 2/3 of the way done after 2 days. It has sounded lovely. Fabio has also been awesome.
Fabio Manchetti, our collaborative pianist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, earlier today, I paid Jackie a compliment through the speaker into the studio, and she said, "Oh, what was that?" I repeated it, and she goes, "I heard it the first time. I just wanted to hear it again."
I mean, can you get too much positive reinforcement during this very vulnerable making process?
The answer is no.
No. Well, Galit, we should remind our listeners of what we're recording and, what's going to be on this album and where did it come from?
So if you've listened at all anytime in the last year, you've heard us talk about our consortium project. We, along with the over 100 consortium members, have commissioned Kate Pukinskis, Mason Bynes, Connor Chi, and Bryn Solomon to write brand new works for oboe and bassoon. And now we are recording an album so that you can all hear the music for yourselves and hopefully play it. So that's the part of the process that we're in right now, is just getting this recording in. It will then be edited and mixed and mastered and released. So that whole process is super exciting. And next week we are going on a whirlwind tour of the Midwest so that we can play these pieces in person and just kind of spread the word about these new pieces that hopefully will be a part of the double reed world in the future.
And listen, Galit's right. It's an extremely professional setup. We have a fabulous recording studio at WSU. And we have a recording engineer, John, who's fabulous. And Chris, why don't you describe what your role is? Like, what even as a producer on a classical music album? Like, we know about, like, Dr. Dre. But, like, what does that mean? What does your job entail?
So I have a score in front of me as well as notes for every section that gets recorded. Let's say in the first movement, they're going from, a certain amount of measures. Is that I watch the score. I have to listen very carefully or I get yelled at. And I'm there to help reinforce certain ideas. So we get done playing, they get done playing, and if they're feeling good about it, but they have some questions. Did you hear when blah happened in measure 10? It's my job to make sure that I'm listening carefully and attentively, but also to kind of help lead the way as far as, like, was that take a yes? Was it a no? If it was a no, why? I'm not really there looking to coach or, give them feedback on what they're playing, but it can be helpful to have an extra set of ears, and therefore, was that together? Was that section in tune? Did it come across the way that I intended? And then sometimes, if we've got a question about something, John and I will go and listen back to it. So it's just really an extra set of ears, and then keeping detailed notes for when the editing happens so they don't have to go fishing through different takes.
Well, and honestly, the care that they're taking in this recording process, they'll give us flack if there is a key click. They'll be like, oh, let me listen back to that. You might have had a key click. It's like, it's the bassoon. The keys are going to click. You're going to get key noise. I don't want to hear about that. One time it was like, Fabio had a mouth sound. I don't know if we can use that. It's like, hello, are we Taylor Swift here?
To be fair, you came to the close of a big section, and like within nanoseconds of the music stopping, there was a slurp sound.
No, that was me. That wasn't Fabio.
Well,
I slurped on my reed.
There was also a Fabio,
yes.
Because listen, sometimes you get done with a big take, and good or bad, you have
a reaction.
Words that you say silently, and we'll just leave it at that. But Galit,
I won.
You had your own kind of noise event. Go ahead and describe this improvisation to the listeners.
Okay, so the last 2 days, I didn't realize how sensitive these microphones are. And I also didn't realize how loud my stomach has been grumbling. Because in Mississippi, I'm a full 2 hours ahead of the time zone in Washington State. So it's 10:30 a.m. here.
You're hungry.
But I'm hungry. It's lunchtime.
You don't need to apologize for being hungry in this group. It's fine.
Well, it just got, like, the first day I had so many tummy grumbles that we had to work around. And then in the afternoon session, my stomach made the loudest sound. It sounded like there were microphones in my stomach.
Can confirm.
And I, stopped and made a shocked face, and it happened during a silence, and then everyone in the recording room looked at me with a shocked face, and it was just the most ridiculous thing to happen. And lucky for us, our recording engineer, John, was able to share that clip with us. And so for your listening pleasure, we have the stomach sound of 2022.
It was so funny because you were like, did you hear my tummy grumble? And everyone was like, yes, we did.
was the tummy sound that ended the world.
And tomorrow we get a special reward.
We get a Chris Wilson special of steak. It's going to be so good.
Yeah, you're going to spoil us because chances are we'll be done recording tomorrow. Knock on wood, but we have enough to celebrate. We're here doing it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you've decided we get a nice little celebratory dinner.
Yeah, steak on the grill just for y'all.
Yeah, this is your payment to us for being our producer for free.
Yeah, that's true. I guess you're doing us the favor and then you're making us food to say good job for this favor.
Yes.
You're doing us.
I got nothing.
Is she a joy or what?
You both are.
Consider buying your processed oboe and bassoon cane from those friendly folks over at Barton Cane. Processed with care and precision for your everyday reed-making needs. Take the pain and injury out of reed-making by letting Barton Cane do the hard, repetitive, boring stuff. Free up time for practicing, happy hours, hikes, baking, and spending time with friends and family. Barton Cane, here for you. Visit www.bartoncane.com.
Ugly Duckling Oboes is dedicated to the development of young oboe players. They provide quality handmade oboe reeds, private lessons, and high-quality oboe sales, rentals, and consignments. The oboes that they rent are conservatory mechanism oboes that include the left-hand F key and low B flat key. All are maintained by oboe-specific technicians. In-person lessons are available, as well as virtual lessons for students who live outside the geographic area or have transportation and scheduling challenges. They also offer online college audition coaching for high school juniors and seniors who plan to audition to be music majors. Visit uglyducklingoboes.com for more details on how you can set up yourself for success and sign up for their newsletter. That's uglyducklingoboes.com. We are delighted to welcome to the podcast John Symer, oboist and repair person. Welcome to Double Reed Dish.
Thanks so much. It's very nice to be here.
We love to get to know our guests by hearing how they first came to their instruments. So could we hear about how you started to play the oboe?
I started to play the oboe in the 8th grade. I was in a public school in Lancaster, New York, which is Buffalo. And I was fortunate I had a middle school, well, it was junior high teacher who was an oboist herself, Tara Steinbacher, and I started with her. And so I had an oboist right from the get-go. I actually wanted to play the bassoon, I think. And when they brought out that teeny little case, I thought, it's kind of small. But I thought the bassoon was called the oboe. And they insisted, no, this is an oboe. So I took it and I got kind of good in about a couple days. I could play the whole C major scale or something. So I stuck with the oboe. And then when I got in band, I realized the instrument that I thought was the oboe was actually the bassoon. And that was somebody sitting behind me. So got that clear immediately. But I was very fortunate. We had very good music teachers in our school, and I got kind of good kind of quickly. Mrs. Steinbacher, the teacher, was somewhat, I thought she was kind of mean to me. So I thought I'd learn to make my own reeds instead of buying hers. So right off the get-go, I taught myself how to make reeds from a reed kit I bought, and they were incredibly bad, but they sort of, when I would open them up, they'd look like straws. They were open like a circle. Anyway, I had a very strong embouchure. And so after that, I studied with a local high school girl named Cheryl Bishkoff. Well, she's now Cheryl Bishkoff. She's in, I think she's principal in the Rhode Island Philharmonic now.
Wow.
but she was a local, and then with Ronald Richards he had been in the Buffalo Philharmonic, but he was a pharmacist also. So he was a very, very great teacher for me, and he taught all the local kids. He was Marty Schuring's teacher, for example, in high school, who was a class year mate of mine in a nearby high school, Marty.
Was there a big rivalry?
No, he was clearly better than I was, and so he was very good. He went to Curtis, and but our teacher was Ronald Richards. He was a very expressive, very, very singing kind of teacher. So I saw the oboe as a very expressive, kind of flexible, wild thing that you had to play, and you could really play your heart out. And so that's kind of how I played it. And then upon graduating I got, I think acceptably good to the point that I got into all-state kind of things, and you get encouragement from success. So at the end of my senior year, I went to a summer school at Saratoga Springs, New York, with the Philly Orchestra, and I got to spend a summer with John Delancey, with three other kids, and I studied with Mr. Delancey, and that was a really eye-opening experience for me, because I learned that the instrument could be better than just a wild thing, kind of like a barnyard animal or something. He was extremely refined, and I really took that to heart and embraced what he did. So I fell in love with that kind of playing, and that's pretty much what we would call the American school, the Tabito school. But I went to a regular college. I went to Dartmouth College, and I was a biology major, and continued a few lessons with Rudy Verbsky there. He was local at the time, living in Marlborough, Vermont, which is down the river from where I was. And then I graduated from Dartmouth and went to Eastman School for grad school, studied with Robert Sprankle. And it gets harder and harder to play the oboe when you get more and more scrutiny. I think we all realize that. And I started thinking midway through that, and probably maybe even before that, and I think this is important. Each of us has our own set of skills, and my particular skills and talents lay more in the technical side of playing the oboe. So I really adored making reeds. I loved figuring them out. I loved tinkering with stuff, gouging machines and shaping and all that stuff. I mean, I had a comical thing happen in high school. I was in All-State, and my oboe teacher, Mr. Richards, was out of town, and he would loan us his shaper handle and tip to shape cane. So I had some gouged cane, and I had no reeds to go to All-State with. So I'm thinking, now what do I do? So I went down in the basement, and my dad had some metal strips. He was an engineer, and so I made my own shaper in about 10 minutes on the grinding wheel, and I made my one
your
reed.
own shaper?
Yeah, I made my own shaper out of a piece of metal, and I shaped one piece of cane, and I made one reed. It was green, and went to New York All-State, and I played the whole festival on that reed, and it was fine. And, I mean, I'd hate to see that. I don't know what happened to that shaper, but that's the kind of kid I was. I was kind of like, I like to fool around with stuff. So when I got out of Eastman, I felt like, maybe I went to a couple of auditions, and I thought, I really don't enjoy this whole performing thing as much as maybe other people might and do. And it wasn't really a big part of what I needed from life. I needed to maybe be more creative or more hands-on with things. So I was very fortunate after that to get an apprenticeship at Paul Covey oboes in Baltimore. He was an oboe maker just starting out, and I was his second employee to make the oboes. He had made 2 oboes so far, so I started with oboe number 3 and through 120. So I made, wow. In 5 years, I was party to the creation of about 120 oboes. Covey oboes.
Do you still have?
I have one. I have number 30 something that I made, and he put my initials on it.
Stop.
I made all the keys on the oboe. So,
that is so special.
well, it's a particular skill that you learn. And so I basically learned everything there is to know about creating an oboe at his shop. And I was there for 5 years, and I was very fortunate. He was extremely nice to me. And then toward the end of that, I mean, I didn't have any end game in mind. I thought maybe I'd stay there a long time, but I had met Dick Woodhams, who was, just freshly installed in the Philly Orchestra. And he would come down to Paul's to get his oboe worked on. And while Paul was doing that, I would fiddle with Dick's gouging machine, and Dick liked that gouge that I would do for him. So I started working on his gouging machine and his various gouging machines, and I got to know him very well, or pretty well. And at a certain point in there, the super famous repairman in Philadelphia, Hans Menig, was retiring, and Dick called me up and said, "Say, there's an opportunity up here in Philly. If you'd like to come and set yourself up, he would be supportive." So I did, and that's how it became me. And I've been here ever since. And so he's kind of like my big hero oboe player, and he's just retired now. So it kind of shows the whole arc of his career kind of meets the arc of my career. Although I'm continuing to carry on what I do, even though he has retired and so forth. So.
Well, you continuing to carry on what you do is good news for all of us. So I'm glad that.
Well, thank you. Sometimes, it's difficult. I do work for tons and tons of wonderful oboists, and I love them. Every single one of them. I work for the top professionals, and I work for the beginners, and I work for amateurs, and I work for kooky people, and super focused people. And so it's been very interesting. And I get a lot of, I get more back from them probably than they get from me in terms of just, interaction and I don't want to say support or anything like that. But aside from the financial, it's been a very interesting career I've had. It's delightful to be able to say that, isn't it? So.
Well, before I ask you more about your very interesting career, you surely won't remember this, but I had a really wonderful interaction with you when I was a student.
Yeah.
I had a very embarrassing thing happen to me. So I was up in Philadelphia. I had you work on my oboe. This was probably, 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, something like that. I had you work on my oboe. It felt amazing. I went to a practice room and I was practicing, and then I set the oboe down on the desk, and I didn't realize that the desk was slanted.
And it rolled off.
And it fell off because I went to the bathroom, and I was in the hallway, and I heard this, and my blood ran cold. You know what I mean? So I felt like such an idiot because you had just that day of the oboe. So then I remember calling you, and you said, "It's okay, bring it tomorrow." And you were so kind to me.
Well, I'm good.
So such a disaster.
I'm glad it did. So it ended okay.
It ended fine because I hadn't left Philly yet, and you just fixed it again, and you were so kind, and I have never forgotten that. I just wanted to say thank you.
That's nice, and I don't even remember. That's not a black mark I would put next to your name, like a check mark, because
now you can.
Okay.
I would like that black mark on the record now, please.
Okay. Very funny.
No, this was back when I was a student, and I just remember feeling so stupid, and you were so nice about it. It was awesome.
Well, sometimes I worry I'm not nice, but that's kind of funny. Repair people have a reputation for being grumpy, a la Hans Menig, and kind of cantankerous and irascible and all those things. And people are always surprised when they meet me. "Oh, you're nice," or you're not 80 years old smoking a pipe, So it's funny. I think as a repair person, you've got to be accessible. You've got to be able to do it when the person need you to do it. I can't get a swab out 4 weeks from now if you need it out, right? So I've made a priority of trying to be that way, although, sometimes I fail to see the phone has rung or something like that. But I really try. So it's a priority.
What are some of your favorite projects to work on? I mean, people send you oboes, they send you gouging machines, they send you all sorts of projects, I'm sure. What are your favorite things to work on?
Probably some kind of voicing on an oboe for a good oboe player, some kind of like tuning thing or some kind of manipulation of the instrument in a way that makes a good instrument even better. Like fixing an out of tune note or making the whole thing click. So it has a really definite ending that's very good and helpful. That, I think, is my favorite thing to do. My least favorite thing to do is something like changing tenon corks, although I do it, or changing another octave pad or something like that. But sure, the famous people are really fun to work for, but it's also really fun to make an instrument that absolutely doesn't work, and in 2 minutes, if I turn a few screws and it works great for the kid, that's also a very fun thing to do. So it's the whole gamut of possibilities there, but it's the good outcome that I like, and so that's what you always hope for, is a good outcome.
Now, with this question, I don't mean to try to put you out of business, but what are some things that you wish people knew more how to do by themselves at home in terms of maintaining their oboes? What are some, common issues that are easy to resolve?
That's an excellent question. I think just people generally many people don't take good enough care of their instrument. For example, you could easily do something like wiping off your keys when you're done, and that can prevent a number of things happening. You can not make reeds with the instrument on your lap so that you get reed shavings in the pads. That's a no-no. That ultimately the little chunks of cane get under the pads, and then you have leaky pads. Or, knowing how to adjust the 8 or 10 simple things, like the serpentine key, the one that goes from the F sharp to the G. That's an easy G sharp. I mean, F sharp to G sharp. That's an easy one for most people to do. So it's kind of the easy things. When I go to a concert and I hear oboist and I hear that their B natural just sounds uncomfortably sharp, and I'm thinking to myself, their little C pad isn't closing, and they just haven't figured out how to adjust that one little thing, or even test for it. So little tests that you can develop at home would be good to learn. And no, it's not putting me out of business, because it's just adjusting that is kind of like too easy in a way. So yeah, basic maintenance, taking good care of the instrument, keeping the case clean. I always think I wish this person hadn't been so messy, because now they ruined many pads. They don't need to. So that kind of thing.
Well, I saw a masterclass once with Ken Potzik, who's a very famous repairman on bassoon, and he kind of had this PowerPoint slide of horror stories, and he didn't name names, but it was kind of like learn from other people's mistakes. And so I wonder if you have, without naming names, any hilarious or just horrifying stories of things you have seen over the years as a repair person.
Yeah, one springs quickly to mind, because I think it is the big horror story, and I think I'll have to name names because it's not as dramatic if I don't. I'll tell you what, I'll leave out the name, but you can figure it out. So there was a very, very famous local oboist here who was in his orchestra, and they were recording the complete set of Beethoven symphonies with Riccardo Muti conducting.
Okay.
30 years ago. And we had, prior to this, this guy, I'm talking about Dick Williams, he was such an experimenter, and he would ask for just amazingly interesting things, and I would carry them out for him many times. So he wanted to try putting a little water tube, like what a bassoon has, in an octave key of an oboe to keep the water from getting in the top octave key, which is a big problem when you're playing, water in the top octave key. So I made this tiny little brass tube and stuck it in so it just protruded into the bore a tiny bit, sort of like a clarinet register key. You could, if you look on the inside, you saw a little thing protruding. So they're recording the Beethoven symphonies while during a break, Dick got the swab stuck against the little water tube. And so the swab stuck. The Philly Orchestra's now on break. And I think Muti's limousine driver drove him back to Center City where I was. And, they were recording maybe 15 minutes away, and he shows up and can you get the swab out? So here's Dick pacing back and forth behind me, cursing himself out for this whole situation. And I'm in there, sweat's pouring off my face, and I'm tapping the swab out. I got it out really quickly, thank God, and, sent him on his way. But he needed to record that on that particular oboe because he had started they were doing Beethoven's third maybe. And you can buy the recording. It's great. It's the Muti. So that's my big horror story. Is that a good one? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's an excellent
amazing
one.
Oh yeah, there's lots of stuff. Sometimes the really traumatic ones you try to forget, like the sat on oboes or the driven over by the car oboes. Those are good. I mean,
can you do anything for that? If an oboe has been run over by a car?
Yeah, sure. You can, as long as it usually rips keys off and like breaks posts out, but you can rebuild all that and, put it all back together or get new parts or, reconstruct things. No, I've done it a couple times, actually. It's kind of fun.
Does it still sound the same after it's been run over by a car and reassembled?
Well, come on. If you're going to run your oboe over with a car, you're gonna really be too picky afterward.
Or at that point, it might just be a very nice lamp.
Right.
So I have a couple. Okay, so there is this. I wasn't aware of this controversy. Should I, as an amateur repair person just trying to maintain my own instrument, remove the octave vent to clean it? Or should I not? Because I've heard do it, and I've heard don't you dare touch it. Throw away the octave vent remover, get rid of it, don't even look at it.
Those octave vent removers that you can buy that are adjustable are somewhat lethal and somewhat unreliable. They're a little too flexible. So I make my own, and I grind them out of a cheap little screwdriver. So you can make a tool that's a little more reliable than those ready-made ones that are adjustable. But no, I think you should be able to do it. Just remember, if you can't do it, then go to the repairman. I mean, if it gets the biggest difficulty is that you won't be able to get it out. And the other difficulty might be that the whole bottom part comes out too. And then you should go see the repairman with that. Mm-hmm. But if that doesn't happen, no, I see no reason that people can't do anything. But that said, I think that fussed over oboes by the players are usually in the worst shape. Half the people completely leave them alone and put them in the case. And those players generally have an instrument that works more often than the ones that are really fooling around all the time and always have the keys off and doing this and that. Because what I do is it's incredibly learnable and incredibly deducible and rational, and it's basically an engineering project. But I don't think everybody has the skill or the manual skill or the conceptual skill to be able to do it. And so if you feel like you don't have that skill, then don't push yourself. I think that if you feel like you can't do it, then don't. And it's perfectly acceptable I can name 15 great oboists who don't own a screwdriver, who wouldn't touch their instrument. And
that's the life I dream of living.
Well, My advice is always don't go looking for trouble on the thing because you'll find it easily. Right. Generally, a left alone instrument probably works better.
Okay.
But if you have the talent, then do it.
Are there any adjustment manuals that you tend to recommend?
I've looked at Carl Sawicki's. It's the one printed on red paper.
I have that one. I love that one.
Yeah, that's good. I think what's difficult, I think Pat McFarland wrote one. It's the kind of thing, if you need that, then maybe you shouldn't be doing this. Although, I think you should be able to look at the instrument and kind of see it or not.
Okay.
Right. There are certain tricks you can learn how to take things apart, in a certain order might help, that kind of thing. But the instrument I don't think is conceived of as a kit. It's not intended to be fooled with, even though they do give you a screwdriver with most oboes. Mm-hmm. But it's funny because the best flutes do not have adjustment screws. The makers are smart enough to make the flute without adjustment screws, so you can't adjust the flute without putting little shims of paper here and there, and so forth. So the flute world's a little different than the oboe world.
What do you recommend for people who have chronic water problems?
Well, sometimes if they've checked that their holes are clean on the instrument, or that they're not playing a cold instrument. One thing to think about is the pitch of your reeds. Are you constantly lifting the pitch when you play? Because if you are, for example, think about the note B flat. Actually, think about which notes tend to get water in them. They tend to be the flat notes. So F, C, B flat. So we're probably, as we play B flat, especially if we have reeds that are below pitch, we're lifting those notes. And as a result, I think we're putting a little more air through them. And so air is encouraged to go where it's traveling. I mean, water is encouraged to go along with the air when it's traveling faster. So the water is going to go to the flat notes. So make sure your reeds are up to pitch when you play. So a lot of playing on flat reeds to try them, I would avoid that. And then constant swabbing, maybe not the best idea. I know players, Bert Lugerli, for example, never swabbed his oboe at all, and claimed he never had water. So go figure on that one. But and then holding the instrument so it angles away so the water runs down the back of it might be helpful for chronic water. But some instruments are just going to get it, and that's hard. But there are tricks to get it out. You could put a little track of maybe lightly soapy water down the back of the instrument, a little dribble of water, and then the fresh track when you play will follow that. So I would say swab it less, make sure your holes are clean. I've had people say when they use a feather, they get less water, and I use a feather for my oboe, or a swab, doesn't really matter. But be careful with swabs also. You don't want to stretch out the instrument.
Right.
Make it too big at the top, because you can, and then that ruins the acoustics of the instrument. Then it doesn't play its scale as well.
Can you explain why excessive swabbing would encourage water?
Well, it's funny, but I've had people come to me. I'm getting lots and lots of water in trill keys or octave keys, and when I take them apart, I see tons of lint in the holes, and I can even tell the color of the swab they use from the lint. So it acts like a little sponge right at that intersection between the bore and the hole, and the water goes there, and then it goes into the lint plug, and then it goes up in the hole. So I think swabs leave more lint than feathers do, and so make sure your swab is not a linty kind, and make sure it's not dusty and dirty when you use it. So if you put it on the floor, probably a bad idea. And I like to give it a little snap shake before I put it through the instrument, just to ensure that it's not dirty, the swab.
Yeah, I'm so interested to hear you say that there's really not much difference between swab and feather, because I've heard, people say all kinds of things about feathers versus swabs and what leaves more garbage in
Yeah.
the instrument.
Well, we oboists. I mean, it's the absolute bright. Well, bassoonists too, but double reed players are absolutely the brightest bunch of people you're ever going to meet. And boy, do we like controversy and argument about all sorts of stuff. And I used to really dig in my heels about the feathers, and I've had cantankerous discussions with people about contentious discussions with people about feathers versus swabs. But do what you will. Just don't get the swab stuck in there. That's not good. So be ultra careful not to have a knot in it before you go in there, and just be mindful of the various pitfalls of each of them. Feathers can leave little bits of feather in there. That's true. I guess there's no good way to do it, but and you don't need to dry it in a dry kind of way. It's just basically get most of the water out.
I wanted to ask about sustainability in oboe making. We hear a lot about endangered woods and, rosewood and granadilla, and we see oboes being made out of different materials. And I know it's a big topic, but I'd love to hear you just kind of talk about that for a while and your thoughts and experiences and perspective on that issue.
Well, I think woodwind making accounts for a relatively tiny segment of the granadilla harvest that comes from Mozambique and, I suppose, southern Tanzania. These trees are quite ubiquitous there. I'm told they're as common as maple trees. So, and granadilla, which is Dalbergia, latifolia, or no, melanoxylon. Dalbergia melanoxylon is the Latin name for granadilla. It's also called mpingo in African. In one of the African languages, and so it's a rosewood. So Dalbergia is a rosewood, and that is covered by the CITES agreement, which is, I guess, the Congress on the International Trade of Endangered Species. So importation and exportation of instruments made of any of the rosewoods is somewhat controlled, and so the governments are on this. It's primarily those rosewoods that come from Brazil that are being mowed down by the acre, every minute in Brazil to make farmland and stuff that are really that should be the object of our, scrutiny here. So I know that probably sounds a little bit, apologistic for that, but this is what I'm told and what I've gathered from, and actually, my biology major helps out here. Because I did study some ecology. But I wouldn't worry too much about granadilla. I understand the preponderance of it is actually used to make charcoal for the Middle East. So if we can convince the Saudis to stop making coffee over charcoal cookers and stuff, that's where most of it goes, apparently. So I don't feel too bad. There's a kind of wood that they're growing on plantations there that's sustainable and renewable called, it's not mpingo, it's mopane, which they're starting to make instruments out of. And it's a dark brown, kind of warm sounding wood. But, I have the two oboes I play on have plastic top joints, and I have no problem with plastic personally playing on it. I know some people feel that the wood makes a difference in the way the instrument sounds. And honestly, I cannot tell the plastic from the wood, really. And my science background tells me that that's a lot of bunk. But people will argue that, certain woods sound better. And I think that comes from a lack of understanding about the way the instruments work. An oboe is really a boundary for for the vibrating air inside. So it's the vibrating air that is making the sound. It's not the wood. Although we feel it vibrate in our fingers. So as a player, we have the sensation that something's vibrating. But unlike a violin or a piano or a tuning fork or a marimba, the oboe is not producing, the oboe itself, the material is not producing the sound. It's just containing the sound. And so that's a distinction. And you can read about this in any of the acoustics books that you want to read it from. Arthur Benaid would be a good one to read. Musical Acoustics, his book goes over this quite well. That said, people people love their different kinds of woods. I think the buffet one where they grind up well, no, they make a clarinet and then they sweep the floor and then they glom it together with resin and they make an oboe out of that. So that's my little
Is that the green line?
That's the green line.
Uh-huh.
But these are perhaps slightly marketing ploys for us to feel better about this whole thing. It is an industrial process, unfortunately. It's a very small production, really. Woodwind instrument making. But yeah, I would encourage, if anybody cares, try more plastic if you feel strongly about this. It's good because that will really eliminate the need to hack down another tree. If we don't need to do that, I agree. It's a sad thing. But I think the reason that the wood is considered scarce is because it's difficult to obtain. Because the people who cut it and the people who mill it and transport it, it needs to make its way to the coast of Africa, and then it comes probably by ship to Europe to be made into instruments. And it is a legacy of our colonialist past. It's true, but it is, and if we realize that and try to do better, I think we're doing a good thing. So that's what I think. How's that?
Well, I'd love to hear you. That's fantastic. But I'm fascinated by this idea that the oboe contains the sound. It doesn't make the sound. And I can hear hundreds of oboists straining against that truth. But could you expand on that and talk about that a little bit more? That's blowing my mind. And I think it could be a really freeing thought.
Yeah. Well, it's difficult because we love the idea that a wooden instrument gives some kind of warmth to the sound, but the acoustics of an oboe are that the reed acts sort of like a valve. So or a bassoon, when you play, it puffs open and then it goes back to where it was, and then it closes an equal amount and then goes back to zero. And each one of those little puffs and non-puffs makes a more or less one sine wave, one wavelength, and each of those, wavelengths has an amplitude and a frequency and so forth, and that vibrating air then is in the instrument, and it's the shape of the instrument that gives the oboe its particular timbre and characteristic. And when I say oboe, you could say bassoon too, and. So it's the length of the vibrating air column. The vibrating air column is more or less what is the analog would be a piano string or a string on a violin or even a guitar. So that is the thing that's vibrating, and that's what makes the sound. It's not the instrument wiggling and jiggling that makes the sound. And so the oboe acts, as I said, sort of like a corral for the vibrating air. It sort of imagine the vibrating air being a bunch of sheep, let's say, in a corral of a certain shape. And if you make the corral, and this is an analogy I often use, if you make the corral out of something like barbed wire, so somewhat rough, then the sheep along the edge are going to get snagged on that, and you're going to get some kind of change in the size and the shape of the vibrating air column. So different textures of the inside of the instrument make a large difference in the way it sounds. So, a smooth wood instrument on the inside or a smooth plastic instrument probably would sound brighter and a little more penetrating, let's say, than a rougher insided instrument. So it's the wall effect against the vibrating air. And I think an engineer who studies something like laminar flow or flow through pipes would be able to address this better than I can. But it's a subtle thing, and we romanticize the materials of the instrument because it makes it more fun for us. But we really shouldn't, maybe.
Well, so that makes sense why you say the plastic top joint and the wood top joint, you can't hear the difference between. And my whole career, I've heard, when they tried the student's plastic model instrument or they tested a bunch of different and they always sounded like themselves. Like we hear that all the time, no matter what they play, they sound like themselves. That what you're saying really speaks to the idea that with the exception of small variations, why a player would sound like their unique self regardless of what material they're playing on.
Yes, it's entirely true. And I think the reason, plastic got such a bad reputation in instruments because they were just more crudely made than the professional ones, which were typically made out of wood. So, but, I have Lorraine is the oboe I play, and I have two of their top joints, and they're terrific. I would not be able to tell blindfolded which one is which, if it's a grenadillo one or a rosewood one or anything else. Now they're making lined ones with plastic, so they have sort of like a plastic interior, which will preserve that piece of wood from cracking. So it saves them from, replacing that wood. And I know that bassoons are made with a lining, ebonite lining on the inside of the part that goes downward, right? All the way down to the boot joint, the smaller part of that. So, so the material there then can't be making a big difference, can it?
Right. Fascinating. You blew my mind. I'm a believer now.
Oh, thank you.
So does this challenge the idea that oboes blow out and you need a new oboe every couple of years?
No, because they do. Because they do erode and stretch and shrink. And a big thing they do is go out of round. On the inside, they go oval inside, and that really goofs up the acoustics. So, generally a played-out instrument can't sustain the low notes at the pitch you want them to be at anymore. That's a good test for them. So if you press on the low notes and they gurgle or motorboat, some people call it that. It's really, I think the term should be heterodyning. It's a different kind of wavelength clashing against each other. So played out is a real phenomenon. Deniers are just in denial. Now you can counteract a played out oboe by using larger and larger reeds but they're measurably larger at the top usually. So I could measure that I could measure an oboe and tell you this is going to play well or not. And that's
fascinating. You can actually put a ruler to it and say.
No, I specialized a type of ruler. It's a specialized set of measuring tools for the inside, the bore measuring tool. So. But it's like a ruler for the bore, measuring the.
This is.
Oh yeah, I do that all the time.
Do the plastic lining, the plastic top joints? Because I have a wood top joint and a plastic top joint, and I play the plastic one all the time. Mm-hmm. Do the plastic ones change bore shape less than the wood ones?
Yes, okay. Much less. But be careful with excessive swabbing because you can wear them out anyway. The downside of the plastic, I think, and I've not really felt this, but I'm pretty sure that it has a different coefficient of thermal expansion. You can take all those. That means at different temperatures, it changes greater than wood does, which is a plus for wood. So plastic actually at really cold temperatures shrinks too much to be useful. And at high temperatures, it may expand too much to be useful. So, but at room temperature, I find the plastic to be terrific. So,
that is so interesting.
And then it doesn't crack either. So that's the best part.
Don't drop it, though. Don't drop it.
Yeah, don't drop it. Yeah.
But that is so interesting because we were at IDRS last week and Galit opened up her case and there was another oboist there who was like, why do you have two top joints? And was kind of baffled that Galit would play plastic regularly. I observed that and was like, oh, this person has hangups about plastic or associating it with a student model or something like that. So this is so interesting having had that experience just last week, the kind of visceral response to her having two top joints that she plays regularly.
Well, people that make wood instruments and support some. I mean, it's in the maker's best interest to get you to buy a new oboe every couple of years now, isn't it? So. It's the traditional material. It's the traditional material, wood.
Right.
And you know, I don't argue with people who insist that their wood sounds better. That's good. I mean, it there's room for every opinion here.
Of course.
I'm just right.
Okay, so you told us about a funny memory that you had with your fantastic career in repair. Are there any other beautiful memories that you'd like to share with us and our listeners?
Well, I'm extremely lucky to have come of age at a time when I got to, when I was a kid, if you had said that I would personally meet, know, and work for John Mack, Alfred Genovese, Mark Lifshitz, Ray Still, you name it, Lou Rosenblatt, those guys, I would have completely fallen off my chair. But it's true, I've gotten to work for every one of those guys, and each one of them I could tell you an anecdote about, and just a great thing. They were our great what do you call that? Pioneers for us, and the oboe world continues. There's great ones, coming along that I've gotten to work for, and times change and things change, and that's all good.
What advice do you have for a young musician who aspires to have a career like yours?
Well, I made sure to try to get as good as I could get on the oboe. One thing I left out there on my little oboe story is that after getting to Philadelphia and setting up as a repairman, I spent a year studying with Robert Bloom, who I consider to be probably my greatest influence. So I left that out. I should include that. I didn't mean to not include it. But I would say get as good as you can be, even if you want to become a repair person or go into some other aspect of playing the oboe. Not everybody has to play principal oboe or be an oboe section member of some orchestra. You can have a very wonderful life doing what I did, meet lots of wonderful people. I've gotten to play as a kind of bonus to my life in some great orchestras as a substitute here and there. I've played many times in Philadelphia Orchestra and Baltimore and National Symphony and New York Philharmonic, and I never would have thought I'd do that, but so my advice is to get as good as you can be on the instrument, no matter what aspect of this you want to do, and then just have fun. It is an expressive art, isn't it? And it's a personal thing. You don't have to do what everybody else says you need to do. So you got to follow your own voice and your own ideals or whatever you have. So,
John, thank you so much. This was such an excellent, mind-blowing conversation. We are so grateful that you took this time to share with us and our listeners. Thank you so much.
Well, you are most welcome. So nice to have spoken with you both. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. We know that you did. Please rate and review. Please subscribe. Please follow us on social media.
And please don't send me hate mail for including that stomach sound.
No, they're going to send you praise mail. But Chris, who do we have coming up on the next episode?
The next episode features composer and bassoonist John Steinmetz.
I love him.
Go make read.
It's time to end this nerd parade. That's how tired we are. Bye, y'all. We love you.